Today it's 80 days since the humanitarian aid blockade of Gaza. This regime has long since passed the threshold for what would constitute legitimate defence following the horrific and condemnable Hamas attacks on October the 7th. This was already genocide before the deliberate and inhumane blocking of life-saving food, medical supplies and shelter, not to mention continued bombing. But they continue to reach new lows. The UN says that no aid has yet been distributed in Gaza, despite a few lorries starting to cross the border after 11 weeks. It estimates that 600 trucks a day are required to begin tackling this chronic humanitarian crisis. So nothing is happening in real terms. UN Humanitarian Chief Tom Fletcher said today that as many as 14,000 babies could die in Gaza if Israel doesn't immediately let aid in. These babies are suffering from severe acute malnutrition in Gaza, and many of them will die over the next number of hours if food is not supplied. What is this if not another Holocaust? To be clear, it is sanitised extermination. There is no defensive justification. It is murder, pure and simple. The entire conflict over decades has been one-sided in terms of the atrocities committed, with Israel responsible for multiples of deaths, ratios of 20 or 30 or 50 to 1, depending on the sources and time periods. Any life is precious, one life is precious, but the facts are undeniable. And yet the world watches on and lets the murder continue, except for a few lone voices. Now, it appears that things have got so horrific that even the EU may be waking up, or at least some of its constituent member states. At this week's meeting of foreign ministers in Brussels, Foreign Affairs Chief Kaja Kallas announced that the European Commission would review the EU-Israel Association Agreement. We have yet to see what details emerge, but even from a signalling perspective, this marks the first formal response to mounting calls for stronger EU action over the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. It's long overdue, even if it's too little too late. And if the Irish government was involved in pushing for this, fair play. But we need real, tangible action, not platitudes. The EU has a preferential trade agreement with Israel, allowing Israeli goods to enter European markets with reduced tariffs. Suspending this would significantly impact their economy and potentially force them to reconsider their policy. There's a whole lot of areas of cooperation where engagement could be frozen, and in this respect I would ask the Minister to pass on to the Tánaiste. There hasn't been any discussions on whether the EU could restrict banking and financial transactions with Israeli institutions that support settlement, expansion and military operations. This would make it harder for Israel to fund its activities in Gaza and the West Bank. For our part, we need to hurry up and bring the Occupied Territories Bill forward at the earliest opportunity. And while it was good to see the arms embargo bill passed to the next stage in the Senate unopposed, I would hope that the government will continue in that spirit over the coming months and get it passed here through the Dáil. As I've said before, and I feel compelled to say again, because of the propaganda machine out there, I have nothing against the Jewish people. I condemn anti-Semitism. I acknowledge Israel's right to exist. But it's a powerful state that is abusing its power and committing atrocities. I feel for those families attacked by Hamas and condemn outright. But this is nothing. Nothing compared to the atrocities being carried out against innocent Palestinians in number terms only. Remember, I said, and others have said, one life is sacred. But anyone with a moral compass will recognise that Israel has committed way more atrocities. And this is why we here in Ireland stand steadfast with the oppressed in Gaza, because we know what it's like to be oppressed. And we won't be intimidated in the face of any threats from the Israeli government or indeed from the White House. It's good that the rest of the EU and Europe appear to be waking up finally, but we will see. But remember, change only comes about when the bullies are confronted head on.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister Higgins.